Subscribe to LearnCap and hit the bell icon to get notified.
Friends, the next amendment is in the chapter of audit and assessment. There's a circular as regards as best judgment assessment is concerned. Friends, as we know, best judgment assessment can be done against a registered person. It can also be done against an unregistered person. When a registered person doesn't file his returns, best judgment assessment order is issued to that registered person. Now friends, before we discuss this circular, it's a very simple circular. Let us have a brief brush up about section 62, best judgment assessment against a registered person. So now friends, there's a person who is registered. He doesn't file his GST returns. The officer gives him a notice under section 46 to file his returns. Now friends, this person has to file the returns within a period of 15 days from the date on which he is receiving the notice under section 46. Friends, please understand and differentiate. This notice is not a show cause notice. This notice is not a show cause notice which is given under section 62, because show cause notice would come with a specified amount. Show cause notice would tell, come and show cause as to why so much of tax along with interest and applicable penalty should not be collected from you. So now friends, this is not a show cause notice. It is only a notice which is asking this registered person to file the returns within a period of 15 days. Now assuming if this person files the returns, the story ends over there, but we want to continue the story. So now this person doesn't file his returns within the set period even after receiving the notice under section 46. Now friends, the next action is the officer straight away issues a best judgment assessment order. The officer straight away issues an order under section 62. Friends, please understand, this is a slight deviation from the general procedure. Generally, we have discussed the process of adjudication as first it should be a show cause notice, then representations, and then it would be an order. But over here, an order is given even without issuing a show cause notice, for the simple reason that the officer doesn't have any specified amount which is going to say, come and show cause why this amount should not be collected from you. Now friends, the officer has already given him a reminder notice, a notice under section 46 to file his returns. This person has not acted. Principles of natural justice are satisfied. The officer straight away has not given an order. He has given a notice under section 46 asking him to file the returns, and with no action from the assessee side, now the officer gives an order under section 62. The only point which I wanted to highlight is this order under section 62 is without any show cause notice. It is although following the notice under section 46, but notice under section 46 is only a reminder notice asking him to file the returns. It is not a show cause notice. So now friends, the officer gives a best judgment assessment order under section 62. Now, after having received the order, if this person files the return within a period of 30 days from the date on which order under section 62 is being received, along with payment of taxes, interest and applicable penalty if any, if applicable late fees if any, if this person discharges his dues, then the best judgment assessment order which was issued is deemed to be withdrawn. Now, if this registered person, even after receiving the best judgment assessment order under section 62, doesn't file his returns, then this officer can proceed to recover the amount from this registered person. Recovery proceedings can be initiated against him. So now friends, this is the general flow of section 62, what we have seen. Now, what is the circular trying to tell? The circular is asking few questions as to what is going to be the standard operating procedure to follow this. Say for example, when should notice under section 46 be given? Now a person has not filed the returns. Let's suppose today is the due date 20th. A person did not file the returns. Should a notice under section 46 be given immediately on 21st? Because section 62 tells that a person who has not filed the returns, notice under section 46 can be given. Now when to give that notice under section 46? Let's suppose 20th is due date. Can you give the notice on 21st morning itself? When are these officers supposed to issue notice under section 46? There's a standard operating procedure which the circular has been given, which the circular is trying to give. So now friends, this circular tells that first you send them an SMS 3 days prior to the due date. You send the registered person an SMS 3 days prior to the due date that the due date is approaching. Send them a reminder SMS. Thereafter, once the due date is over, send them a mail that they have not filed the returns and action under section 62 can be initiated. Then after a period of 5 days, send them a notice under section 46 that you are reminded to file a return. So friends, here notice under section 46 would be given after a period of 5 days from the due date of filing the return. So now friends, this notice under section 46 is given. Then the story further continues. If it files it within 15 days, no issues. If it doesn't file it, then an order is going to be given. A best judgment assessment order would be given under section 62. Now friends, after an order is given under section 62, if this person pays the taxes, interest, late fees within a period of 30 days from the date of receipt of this order, no issues, this order is going to be withdrawn. Otherwise, this officer can proceed to recover the amount. However, friends, as we all know, there's a concept called as provisional attachment of property. There's a concept of provisional attachment of property. Friends, normally, when can the property be attached? The property can be attached only after an order is being passed, right? And that too only after a period of 3 months from the date of the order. Let's suppose an order is passed today. Immediately tomorrow, the officer cannot come and attach your property. A minimum period of 3 months is given for recovery proceedings to be initiated. So friends, the normal flow is, it is show cause notice, it is representations, it is demand order, after demand order 3 months, and then recovery proceedings. This is the general flow what we have seen. However, provisionally, wherever the government finds that giving so much of time, this assessee would run away or it would prejudicially affect the revenue, in those cases, the government can provisionally attach the property even before giving a best judgment assessment order under section 62. This is what the circular is reiterating. That means within a period of 30 days from the date of best judgment assessment order, if the person is still not filing the returns, the government can proceed against the recovery action which is there under section 78 or 79. Alternatively, in deserving cases, this officer can also provisionally attach the property even before giving an order under section 62. So friends, let's have a look at the wordings of the circular. So reminder SMS before 3 days of the due date. This is the standard operating procedure which has been prescribed in the circular 129/48/2019. Mail communication alerting non-filing of returns after the due date. Notice under section 46, 5 days after the due date asking to furnish the returns within 15 days. Best judgment assessment order under section 62 if return is not furnished in 15 days. For the purpose of assessment of tax liability under section 62. Now friends, this aspect is important. Now friends, the officer has to assess the tax liability in best judgment assessment order. He gave a notice under section 46, the registered person did not respond. Now the officer has to pass an order, and in order he has to mention the liability. Now from where from is he going to calculate his liability? So now friends, the officer, or rather the circular is trying to tell that for computing best judgment assessment order under section 62, the data from the following areas can be taken. If the assessee has filed his GSTR 1, he did not file the returns, only the notice under section 46 is being given, but GSTR 1 is not a return. If the assessee has filed GSTR 1, not filed GSTR 3B, still he is a return defaulter. Still is a return defaulter. Notice under section 46 can be issued to him. So now friends, if the assessee has filed GSTR 1, take the details of outward supplies from there. The next point, take the details of inward supplies from GSTR 2A which might be auto-populated for the assessee. The next point, take the information available from the e-way bills which are generated by the assessee or the e-way bills which are generated against the assessee. For the e-way bills which are generated by the assessee, the details of outward supplies or the details of sales could be extracted. For the details of e-way bills which are generated against the assessee, that means somebody else has generated an e-way bill for this assessee as the consignee. From those details, you can extract the purchase details and any other information from any other source, including from inspection under section 71. That means the officer can go access his business premises and obtain the information. So out of keeping all these information in hand, best judgment assessment order under section 62 can be passed. So this order is withdrawn if the returns are filed within 30 days of the order. Otherwise, the proper officer can proceed to recovery as per 78 and 79. So according to the recovery mechanisms which are available under section 78, 79, generally 3 months period is given for the recovery actions to be initiated. 3 months from the date of order. Initiate action under 29 subsection 2, that is cancellation of registration in case returns are not filed for the specified tax periods. So the officer can further proceed and cancel the registration for non-filing of returns for those fixed tax periods which are mentioned in 29 subsection 2. That means for a consecutive six tax periods, if returns are not being filed, the registration can be cancelled. And in case of a composition taxable person, for consecutively 2 tax periods. Specific cases, provisional attachment to protect under section 83 before issuance of best judgment assessment order. So even before issuance of an order, in order to protect the interest of the revenue, the officer can also provisionally attach the property under section 83. So this is a standard operating procedure of what protocol should be followed by an officer to initiate and complete the action under section 62. This is what is given in circular number 129/48/2019. The next change in the area of appeals and revision. Now friends, to understand this change, let's have a revision of the structure of appeals and revision. Now friends, an adjudicating authority passes an order. First you would have issued a show cause notice, then representations, then finally he would have passed an order. Now friends, if the assessee is agitated by this order, he could prefer an appeal before the appellate authority. Appellate authority would give its order. If the assessee is still agitated, he would then prefer an appeal before the appellate tribunal. He would then prefer an appeal before the appellate tribunal. If the assessee is still agitated even by the order of appellate tribunal, then he would prefer an appeal before the High Court, and thereafter the appeals would lie before the Supreme Court. However, if there is any matter which is involving place of supply issues, the appeal from appellate tribunal would directly go to Supreme Court. Now friends, this is as regards as the structure of assessee is concerned. Now friends, the appeal structure for the department. The adjudicating authority has passed an order. If the department is agitated by the order, then the department would first prefer an appeal before the appellate authority. Thereafter it goes to appellate tribunal, thereafter to High Court, and thereafter to Supreme Court. Of course, if any matter is involving place of supply, from appellate tribunal directly it goes to Supreme Court. Now friends, in this structure there is a small change at the appeals at the first level when we are going to compare between the department structure and the assessee structure. As regards as department is concerned, department has got 2 innings. Department has got 2 innings for the appeals at the first level itself. That means, let's say an order is passed by an adjudicating authority. The commissioner would take up this order, and if the commissioner finds out, the commissioner would review this order, and if the commissioner finds, or if the commissioner is of the opinion that this order is not accordance with law, then this commissioner would instruct an officer subordinate to him to file an appeal before the appellate authority. This is the first inning what the department has got. There is also a second inning which the department has got. The second inning is, there is an authority called as revisional authority. There is authority called as revisional authority. This revisional authority would review the order, and if this revisional authority finds out, that this order which is there is not in accordance with law, the revisional authority itself is going to revise the order. The revisional authority is going to revise the order and give it to the assessee. So now friends, there are 2 innings for the appeals at the first level. Either the commissioner could instruct an officer subordinate to him to prefer an appeals before the appellate authority, or the revisional authority can take up this order, revise it and give it back to the assessee. So now friends, so far who is a revisional authority is not being defined. So far who is a revisional authority is not being defined. Now by this amendment they have defined who is going to be a revisional authority. So friends, I recap this again. This is very important for you to understand, because we are just not going to discuss the change. We are also going to discuss what is the problem which is lying in this change. So therefore, at the cost of repetition, I make you revise again. Any order which is there of the adjudicating authority, the commissioner can review that order, and if he finds out that the order is not in accordance with the law, then he would instruct his subordinate officer to prefer an appeal before the appellate authority. Now the appellate authority would give its order. If the department is still agitated, it would go to appellate tribunal, still agitated to High Court, still agitated to Supreme Court. This is the first innings which is there. Now at the first level there is a second inning which is there. Now in the second innings, if the revisional authority finds out that the order is not in accordance with law, it would revise the order and give it back to the assessee. Now friends, please understand, the revisional authority takes up the order, it revises the order and gives it back to the assessee. Now friends, it could also be a case that the assessee is agitated against the revisional authority's order. The assessee would go to appellate tribunal, then to High Court and then to Supreme Court. Friends, it could also be a case that the department is again agitated by the order of the revisional authority. The department is again agitated by the order of the revisional authority. Against the order of the revisional authority, the department also can prefer an appeal to the appellate tribunal, then to High Court and then to Supreme Court. I'm sure you are now clear with this structure. For you, what is important to remember is, when revisional authority picks up its order, when revisional authority picks up an order, revises it and gives it back to the assessee, even the department can be agitated. The department can also further appeal against the order of this revisional authority before appellate tribunal. This is very important for you to note, because only when you are clear with this, we'll be able to understand the issue which is there in this amendment. So now friends, we go to the amendment. What does the amendment says? The amendment, so far they have not defined who is a revisional authority. So far they have not defined who is the revisional authority. Now they defined who is going to be the revisional authority who can revise the orders. So now friends, here there's a change. Who is the revisional authority? Notification 5/2020 Central Tax tells you that for the orders which are passed by additional commissioner or joint commissioner, the revisional authority is going to be the principal commissioner or commissioner. If the adjudicating authority who passed the order is deputy commissioner, assistant commissioner or superintendent, the revisional authority is going to be additional commissioner or joint commissioner. Now friends, as we all know, these are the only persons who can pass an order. These are the adjudicating authorities. So if the adjudicating authority happens to be an additional commissioner or joint commissioner, revisional authority is going to be principal commissioner or commissioner. If the adjudicating authority who passed the order was deputy commissioner, assistant commissioner or superintendent, revisional authority is going to be joint or additional commissioner. Now friends, as far as this amendment is concerned, it is only so much. Now friends, we are going to discuss what is the issue which is there in this amendment. Now friends, the issue is, let's suppose the order is, let's say scenario number 1. The order is passed by deputy commissioner or assistant commissioner or superintendent. In this case, the revisional authority is going to be additional commissioner or joint commissioner. Now, the revisional authority revises the order. That is, the joint commissioner or additional commissioner is revising the order. So, this revisional order is passed. Can the department be agitated against this? The answer is yes. Now, if the department is agitated, can it prefer a further appeal against this revision order before the appellate tribunal? The answer is yes. Now, what is the process? The process is the commissioner would take up the order. The commissioner would take up the revisional order which is passed by additional commissioner or joint commissioner. He would instruct an officer who is subordinate to him to prefer an appeal before the appellate tribunal. And thereafter an appeal is going to be filed before the appellate tribunal. So this is going to be the sequence as regards as this is concerned, that is the deputy commissioner or assistant commissioner or superintendent has passed the original order. Joint commissioner or additional commissioner has revised the order. The commissioner is agitated against this. The commissioner reviews the order. He is agitated against this revisional order which is passed. He instructs his subordinate to prefer an appeal before the appellate tribunal. So far it is so good. Now the real issue lies in scenario number 2. In scenario number 2, let's say the adjudication order was passed by additional commissioner or joint commissioner. The adjudication order is passed by either additional commissioner or joint commissioner. Now friends, when the order is passed by additional commissioner or joint commissioner, who is going to be the revisional authority? The revisional authority is commissioner himself. The revisional authority is commissioner himself. So now friends, when the revisional authority is commissioner himself, the commissioner picks up the order, he revises it. He revises the order. Now friends, let's take a scenario where after the commissioner has revised the order, the department is agitated against this order. The department is agitated against this revisional order which is passed by the commissioner. Now it wants to prefer an appeal before the appellate tribunal. Can it happen? Friends, what is the procedure? The procedure is commissioner would review the order which is passed by the revisional authority, and if it is not in accordance with law, it would instruct its subordinate officer to file an appeal before the appellate tribunal. Now friends, in this case, the revisional authority itself is the commissioner. So how can commissioner take his own order and say that this is not in accordance with law and then instruct his subordinate to file an appeal before the appellate tribunal? So this is a very peculiar case where the revisional authority is also commissioner only, and the person who is supposed to instruct his subordinate to prefer an appeal before the appellate tribunal is also the commissioner only. So friends, in this case, what would ideally happen is, wherever the commissioner has picked up an order for revision, that is, wherever the order is passed by additional commissioner or joint commissioner, the commissioner is the revisional authority. Wherever the commissioner as a revisional authority has revised this order, thereafter there is no scope for the department to prefer a further appeal before the appellate tribunal because of the procedure which is set. That is, the commissioner has to take up this order which is revised. If he is agitated, he would instruct his subordinate to prefer an appeal before the appellate tribunal. But now the person who has passed the revisional order is also commissioner, and the person who is agitated is also going to be the commissioner. How can he instruct a person to agitate or to file an appeal against an order which he himself has passed? So in this case, friends, when the principal commissioner or commissioner is the revisional authority, the doors of the department should be closed for filing any further appeal before the appellate tribunal. So friends, this was the analysis which we had done as regards as notification 5/2020 is concerned. But for examination, all that you need to remember is who is a revisional authority. If the order is passed by additional commissioner or joint commissioner, it is going to be principal commissioner or commissioner. If the adjudicating order was passed by deputy commissioner, assistant commissioner or superintendent, the revisional authority is going to be additional or joint commissioner. The next amendment in anti-profiteering, friends, section 171 subsection 3A has been amended to state that if it is being concluded by the anti-profiteering authority that a person has profiteered some amount, if a person has profiteered some amount, this person shall be liable to pay a penalty equivalent to 10% of the amount so profiteered. 10% of the amount which is profiteered. So this is going to be the quantum of penalty under section 171 subsection 3A which a person is liable to pay if it is held by the anti-profiteering authority that profiteering is being done by this person. However, friends, this amount of penalty is not required to be paid if the person is depositing the profiteered amount within a period of 30 days from the date of order. So now, friends, why this change has come? Why this change has come in section 171 subsection 3A? Because now this is the change that where the authority referred to in subsection 2 after holding examination as required under the said subsection comes to a conclusion that any registered person has profiteered under subsection 1, such person shall be liable to pay penalty equivalent to 10% of the amount so profiteered, provided that no penalty shall be leviable if the profiteered amount is deposited within 30 days of the date of passing of the order by the authority. So now, friends, why this change has come? This change has come because earlier in Rule 133, the quantum of penalty was not fixed. Rule 133 said that imposition of whenever it is being concluded by the authority that a person has profiteered, he is liable to pay penalty. Now, according to Rule 133 blankly told that imposition of penalty as specified under the Act, and under the Act there was no specific provision for penalty. So whenever these anti-profiteering authorities asked the registered person to pay penalty, these persons were agitated. They took a legal grounds in the courts that there is no provision in the Act for anti-profiteering. Whatever the amount which has been profited, there is no provision in the Act to impose a penalty. So therefore, these penalties which were imposed could not stand the test of law in the courts. So hence, this section 171 subsection 3 has been amended and penalty is brought into the Act itself, and the penalty is 10% of the amount so profiteered. However, if this amount is deposited within a period of 30 days from the date of order, this penalty shall stand waived. The next amendment is something to do with troubleshooting. Now, friends, while implementing the provisions of GST, since GST is a fairly new law, while implementing the provisions of GST, if there is any troubleshooting which needs to be done, if there is any difficulty which is arising due to the wordings which are there in the law, and when you try to practically implement the provisions of these wordings, if there is any practical difficulty which arises, how to troubleshoot that problem? So friends, there are two provisions which are there in the GST law, section 148 and section 172. So these are basically troubleshooting provisions which are there in the GST law if there is any difficulty which arises while implementing the provisions of law. So now, friends, what does section 148 tell you? Section 148 tells you that the government can notify a special procedure for a certain class of registered persons. The government could notify a special procedure for a certain class of registered persons, say for example, as far as compliance is concerned. Now let's take an example. Friends, according to section 37 of GST law, GSTR 1, needs to be filed on a monthly basis. Let it be for any registered person, GSTR 1 needs to be filed on a monthly basis. So now friends, these are the wordings of section 37 which is there in the law. But when the government tried to implement this provision, or when GST was to be implemented, government found out that it is not possible for all registered persons to file GSTR 1 on a monthly basis. There are so many SMEs which are not in a position to file GSTR 1 on a monthly basis. So now friends, for them certain relaxation was given that they could file GSTR 1 on a quarterly basis. Now friends, this provision was not there in section 37 when this notification came, that a class of registered person, that means whoever is having an aggregate turnover below 1.5 crores, they could file GSTR 1 on a quarterly basis. This provision was not there in section 37 at that given point of time. So now friends, here according to law, implementation needs to be done that every person has to file GSTR 1 on a monthly basis, but practically it was not possible. So therefore, using section 148 for a class of registered persons, that means all those persons whose aggregate turnover is below 1.5 crore rupees, for them an option was given that they could file their GSTR 1 on a quarterly basis. So this is a troubleshooting mechanism which is available under section 148 for a class of registered persons. Now friends, what is section 172? Section 172 is as regards as removal of difficulty is concerned. While implementing the provisions of law, if there is any difficulty which is arising, an order can be passed under section 172. Now friends, this order has the impact of amending the act itself. This order has an impact of amending the act itself. Say for example, let's say the due date of annual return should be extended. Now friends, the section 44 as it stood prior to amendment, annual returns are filed under section 44. Now section 44 as it stood prior to the amendment we already discussed in this series. As it stood prior to the amendment, the due date was fixed as 31st of December. There was no provision in section 44. I am talking about this scenario prior to amendment of section 44. Section 44 did not contain any provision wherein the due date of annual return can be extended. But friends, as we've already seen, for financial year 17-18, for financial year 18-19, the due dates of annual returns are extended. Now friends, without section 44 having a specific provision, how can this be done? So this was being done using section 172. An order was being passed under section 172. By extending, an order was passed giving effect to extending the due date of annual return, even though the act did not specifically provide, even though section 44 did not specifically provide for. Take another example. Let's say TCS returns. Section 52, TCS returns needs to be filed on a monthly basis, and there is also called as an annual statement which a TCS person is supposed to file. Now even for those returns and those statements, there was no provision in section 52 to extend the due dates of GSTR 8 or GSTR 9B, the annual statement. But however, those dates were extended. Those dates were extended using section 172. So friends, 172 has got the power to amend the act itself. When the government releases an order under section 172, it is as good as amending the act. Now friends, since it is as good as amending the act, the order which is issued under section 172 needs to be placed before the House of the Parliament and also needs to be placed before State Legislative Assembly for its approval, because said order issued under section 172 is going to amend the act itself. So friends, these are the troubleshooting provisions which are available. Now friends, during COVID, the government realized that if at all the act needs to be changed, that is, if at all the due dates which are mentioned in the act needs to be changed, an order needs to be passed under section 172, it cannot be changed by merely issuing a notification. What is the difference, friends? Notification is going to come from the board itself. The board itself can extend the time limit. The board itself can issue a notification. But as regards as an order is concerned, that needs to be placed before the Parliament or State Legislative Assembly and its approval needs to be taken. So friends, the government realized during COVID that if at all anything in the act, any time limit in the act needs to be changed, it has to come only through an order. Notification is not going to be sufficient. So friends, the government realized that they required the powers in the act, that even the time limits in the act itself can be changed by issuing a notification, and an order should not be required. So take another example. Let's say the time limit for making an application for refund. The time limit for applying refund is 2 years from the relevant date. Now, if you want to extend this date, which is there in section 54 of the Act, you cannot just pass a notification, because by passing a notification, if you want to extend that date, it is as good as amending the Act, which a notification cannot do. So therefore, section 172 is to be used by giving an order for the purpose of extending that time limit. Now friends, as regards as order is concerned, it requires the approval of the legislature. So friends, the government realized that even in cases of pandemic, in cases of COVID, like situations, the government wants a power to extend the time limit just by issuing a notification. So keeping that in mind, new section 168A is being inserted into the Act. So let's have a look at section 168A. The power of the government to extend time limits in special circumstances. Notwithstanding anything contained in this Act, override all the provisions which are there in the Act, the government may, on the recommendations of council, by a notification, extend the time limit which is specified or prescribed or notified under this Act. So friends, now the government has got special powers that the time limits which are there in the Act also can be extended by merely issuing a notification, and you need not issue an order for it. In respect of actions which cannot be completed or complied with due to force majeure. Now friends, what is force majeure? It has been defined. We are going to look into it. The power to issue notification under subsection 1 shall include the power to give retrospective effect to such notification from a date not earlier than the date of the commencement of Act. So friends, this notification could come even from retrospective effect. So friends, during COVID, notification was issued under section 168A, extending the time limits, various time limits which are present in the Act, and this notification came with retrospective effect. That is, after the lockdown started, the due dates were already expired. Now the government wanted to extend these due dates, so the government issued a notification later giving retrospective effect. So explanation, what is meant by force majeure? For the purposes of this section, the expression force majeure means a case of war, epidemic, flood, drought, fire, cyclone, earthquake, or any other calamity caused by nature or otherwise. So it could be human related calamity, it could be nature related calamity, affecting the implementation of any of the provisions of this Act. So friends, in simple terms, section 168A, the government has got a special power to extend the time limits which are there in the Act just by merely issuing a notification. So let's have a quick difference between section 172, orders issued under section 172, and notifications issued under section 168A. As regards the scope is concerned, the scope of section 172 is very wider as compared to the scope of section 168A. Under section 172, order can be passed not only for extending the time limits, but for removing any difficulty. So extension of time limit is included in removal of difficulty. Removal of difficulty is much wider than compared to extension of time limit. Section 168A limits its scope only for the purpose of extending the time limits which are there in the Act. Now friends, let's take an example, say section 172. In earlier, when GST was initially launched, section 10 as it stood at that point of time, initially when GST came, the composition scheme told you that a person who wants to opt for composition scheme could either be a trader, or he could be a manufacturer, or it could be a service provider. If he has to be a service provider, it should be only restaurant or food related services. Any person who is supplying services other than restaurant or food related services was not eligible to opt for composition scheme. This was section 10 as it stood initially when GST law came. Now friends, let's say there was a trader. Now this trader had interest income. Now friends, this trader has interest income. So therefore, interest was a consideration for supply of services. Now this trader was exclusively only engaged in goods, plus he had also got interest income. Now friends, because of this interest income, he was not eligible to opt for composition scheme as it stood at that point of time when section 10 came. Of course, section 10 was later amended. So now friends, those traders face difficulties that they're not in a position to opt for composition scheme just because they are receiving interest income. So the government passed an order under section 172. The first order, order number 1/2017 came out, and they told that any person who is receiving interest income will also be eligible for choosing composition scheme. Of course, later section 10 itself was amended to bring this provision which is there in the order into the section 10, but at that point of time section 10 did not have this provision that a person who is receiving interest income actually, according to section 10 at that point of time, was ineligible to opt for composition scheme. So therefore, at that point of time the government used order under section 172 to remove this difficulty. So friends, the point which we are trying to discuss is, as regards to section 172 is concerned, it is not only limited to extending the time limits. Any difficulty which arises while implementing the provisions of the Act, section 172 can be used to remove those difficulties. Of course, those difficulties which are being removed should be in spirit of the Act. Whereas section 168 is only for extension of time limit during force majeure. Circumstances, it could be an order under section 172 can be passed in any circumstances. Now, as regards as 168A is concerned, only during force majeure, that is during the natural calamities, only during the time of calamities or pandemics, only during that time a notification under section 168A can be issued. Procedure. An order which is passed under section 172 would require an approval from Parliament or State Legislative Assembly because it is as good as amending the Act. But however, section 168A, it is through a notification, so merely a notification is sufficient. It does not require the approval of Parliament or State Legislative Assembly. Sunset clause. Yes, under section 172, there is a sunset clause of 5 years. Friends, earlier the sunset clause was 3 years. Now it has been extended to 5 years. That means orders under section 172 can be passed only up to a period of 5 years from the date of implementation of GST. So from 1st July 2017 plus 5 years, that is 30th of June 2022. Only till 30th of June 2022, orders under section 172 can be passed. Of course, it is very logical also, friends, because difficulties would arise only in the initial stages of implementation of an act. Thereafter, the difficulties should not arise. So therefore, a time gap, a window initially was given for 3 years. Later on, it is extended to 5 years. So orders under section 172 can be issued only up to a period of 5 years from the date of implementation of act, whereas there is no such sunset clause in section 168A. So friends, this is all about section 168A. Realizing the difficulties which were faced by the government during COVID, 168A was inserted by means of an ordinance in the CGST Act. Friends, we have come to an end of this amendment lectures. I wish you all the very best for your examination. If you have any queries, you can write to me over here. Friends, please don't waste time. Please don't be anxious. Please don't lose hope. Things will return to normalcy sooner or later. Till then, remember the Shiva's Damru. Keep practicing. All the very best for your examination.
Subscribe to LearnCap and hit the bell icon to get notified.